Welcome to Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brandon. In this series, we explore the real world stories of key executives to find the leadership lessons that help move us all forward. If you like these conversations, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button. It'll help us out a lot. But now we got another great program for you today, so let's make it happen. Well, we've got another great program for you today. We have with us Omer Brookstein, the co-founder and CEO of Excite Corporation out of Mountain View, California, also with offices in Tel Aviv and in Hoboken, New Jersey. That's a pretty interesting combination of places. So Omer has started his career as a major in the Israeli Defense Forces in the elite 8200 Cyber Intelligence Unit. He was commander of multiple officers and soldiers collecting and analyzing strategic intelligence. I guess that was the reason he got into the technical arena. He's been in the technical arena his whole life. He's been a principal manager of technology at Crestron Electronics. He's been the CTO there. He's overseen sales with multiple corporations, including Dell and McKinsey and Applied Materials and many others. Omer's breaking some new ground with his company, and we're going to hear all about that today, as well as some key leadership lessons. Omer, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Wayne. It's a pleasure being here today.
Yeah, it's really good to have you. I was going to read as a part of the introduction something here that I just wanted to read now about Excite Corporation. It says Excite has evolved into a full stack platform for managing and running intelligent and AI powered devices, helping device manufacturers to gain full visibility into their ecosystems and introduce new and innovative business models. I didn't think I could explain what that meant, but I know that you can. Help us out.
Sure, I'm happy to. So when you think about it, and I always use an analogy. When you buy a Tesla car, right? The first thing you do is you open the app, you sign up, and from that point on, Tesla has visibility to the driver, to the customer who's using the app. And once they have that visibility, they can start and offering you premium and aftermarket sales as insurance, full self-driving, AI-based, and maybe non-AI based premium feature that to enhance your car experience. And when you think about it, these kind of things become a great competitive advantage for Tesla. I know when you come from the car industry, so you probably know this very, very well, as they allow Tesla to significantly cut the cost of their car and be more competitive in ways that GM and Ford and others cannot do because they make up for that in the aftermarket sale. Another great example is every time we buy an iPhone, right? The first thing that we do, we put our iCloud account on it. And from that point on, Apple knows who we are, how we use the phone, obviously in an aggregated and anonymized way. And everything we buy from Apple and through Apple, and they don't care if you bought a phone directly from their Apple Store, from Verizon, AT&T, or any other provider. However, if you think about pretty much any other device manufacturer out there, from projector company, display companies, light fixture, our other car connectors, industrial, robotics, they don't have the same kind of capabilities. If you're familiar with the way B2B business work, those device vendors, they sell through their channel partners. And by doing so, they lose visibility to their devices, how they're being used and by who, and any possible path to recurring revenue monetization from these devices. And it turns out that for Tesla and Apple and some others maybe to do what they've done, it takes a very significant investment to build a full software stack to power that. What we do at Excite, we build exactly that. We build that software stack in the cloud that enable any device manufacturer to have better visibility, better collaborate with the channel partners and end customer that they serve, and a path to their recurring revenue monetization.
Yeah, no, that's a good explanation. So I guess there needs to be connectivity with the devices as well in some cases. Right. So a lot of the devices to this point in time that you might have, whether it's in a vehicle or in your home somewhere, they don't necessarily have connectivity. More and more of them do. But it's not just connectivity like to your thermostat, for example. You got to have connectivity all the way through to the other things that you might upgrade or downgrade appropriately as the customer wanted, I suppose. So are you working on the hardware at all, on the hardware side of this, or just on the software side?
No, so we do only the software side, but we rely on the fact, and that's the good news, that in recent years, pretty much every device, and I should say that we focus on B2B devices, less on the consumer side, but pretty much every device in the consumer world as well are becoming more connected, cloud connected, more intelligent, and more towards AI, driven functionality. And as
Right.
these devices, become more, smarter, and is like you say, AI is kind of escaping the cloud, it turns out that they need a new types of platforms and infrastructure. And excited that business platform that offer a very significant and unique business value proposition for our customers. In many cases, when I have to really kind of nail it down to one sentence, I say that we enable our customers to Teslasize their business
Mhm.
and become more like Tesla products, software-defined companies like Tesla.
Yeah, that's great. So we talked about this before, but I don't think you have a lot of competitors in your space right now.
Correct. So when you look at the Excite platform as a whole, we have multiple, I guess, interfaces and multiple type of customers. But when you're looking for the perspective of the device manufacturers and the very, very unique value proposition that we offer to them, there's no other company in the world that does that, that develop that complete stack or full stack cloud software purposely designed for these device manufacturers.
So as time goes on, will there be a particular aspect of your design or your functionality or your software capabilities that will be a distinct competitive advantage? Or will it just be your first to market status and the ability to get out there, get your brand known, and kind of be the standard for this particular level of capabilities and services?
Well, I think we first have the advantage of first one to the market. That's definitely
Yeah.
a one. And maybe without getting too much into the detail, as we're building the platform, we are creating an ecosystem. Because what's interesting, and we see that in the consumer world as well, so maybe that would be a great analogy. When you have in your house a connected thermostat from one brand and a
Mhm.
speaker for music from another brand and TV from another brand and so on, the last thing you want to have is five, six different applications to control them all,
Right.
right? You want to bring them all
Right.
into a single application. And it
Exactly.
turns out that we have the same kind of challenge in the enterprise world, just in a much larger scale. So as we build the Excite ecosystem, we connect and let the different stakeholders to collaborate, the device manufacturers, their service providers, and the enterprise customers. And by doing so, we're giving the enterprise customers a way to orchestrate devices from multiple brands in a single interface, in a single pane of glass. So as we do that, the ecosystem grows, and like many other ecosystems, that by nature create a great advantage and great value for the players in the ecosystem. Once again, from the consumer world, you can think about Facebook as or any other social network as an ecosystem like that. So that's
Mhm.
by nature happens. The other thing is that we're getting a much deeper understanding on the data and the telemetry this device sends to the cloud. And this allows us to constantly improve our platform in a way that would be much more difficult to any newcomers.
Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. Now, from a customer perspective, I know you're working more in the B2B space, but in the customer perspective, what should we expect over the next few years? Do you have an outlook on how these software-defined solutions will begin to enter our world more and more and do integration of devices and those types of things in the home as well as in the business arena that you're working on?
Well, I think personally, I think and that's maybe we'll talk about it later, why we started the company, where we came to that idea. But
Mhm.
I think this is inevitable. And it is inevitable for multiple very strong financial forces. The end customers, once again, in the enterprise and the B2B world, they're moving or looking to move to buy OPEX over CAPEX. It's just a better and easier way for them to expense and use their budget. The device manufacturers, on the other side, in many of those industries, devices are constantly being commoditized, prices are going down, and margins are shrinking. And they're constantly looking for new way to develop recurring, more predictable revenue streams. And in between the vendors and the end customers, we always have the channel partners, the resellers, the value-added resellers, and so on. And them as well, they're looking to develop recurring, more predictable revenue stream through managed services. So those really strong financial forces driving the markets into those more predictable recurring business models. But until recently, they lacked the technology infrastructure that enabled them to do so.
Yeah, I think, as many of us might think about how to keep costs down, it would be putting less content into the devices. But in this case, you'd actually have to provide the devices with a full range of capabilities that could be set depending upon the level of service the customer buys. So it's interesting. Is it the economies of scale with the commonality of the devices that drives the cost advantage over actually potentially in some cases having more content?
Yeah, well, that's actually a very interesting use case because once again, I'll go back to Tesla's analogy. I always say that
Mm-hmm.
there's only one Model Y in the color of white, right? Everything
Right.
else is being defined by software, battery, extended range, acceleration, and so on. But in other industries, what you often find is that you have multiple SKUs, multiple part numbers that from hardware perspective are identical, almost identical the same, but they have multiple variation with different software features toggle on and off. And
Mm-hmm.
vendors leveraging our platform actually downscaling the number of part numbers and can greatly reduce the complexity of their inventory management in ways
Mm-hmm.
that allows them to, simply have less working capital, be more efficient on the budget, and being able to sell the hardware to their customer in a better price point, while also being able to upgrade after the initial point of sale.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, in the car business, so whether you're thinking about an engine, bigger engines, superchargers, physical apparatus and device changes, or even electric motors, more windings, stronger
Mhm.
magnets, those kinds of things. I suppose if you have a level of content that's sufficient within any device, and then you upscale it, downscale it with the software, there could be some savings there. But I'm just thinking about someone who buys a low end motor that has limited capabilities, maybe zero to 100 in 9 seconds instead of 3 seconds.
Mhm.
Do you have to have a motor that has the 9 second capability in that car? So there's some trade-offs there that I'm sure will be interesting as we go forward, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct. I mean, you cannot make a 65-inch display into a 75-inch display through software, right?
right,
But in some
exactly.
cases, once again, Tesla makes a good example here. In some cases, it actually financially beneficial for the vendor to put the larger battery in, but only
Hmm.
allow 80 or 70% of the capacity.
Right,
And if you pay
right.
additional fee, that will unlock the full capacity. So it's a pretty simple Excel file at the end of the day.
Right, and if you do the pricing model across the entire spectrum of your customers, that's a very different way to look at the business, and I think a
Correct.
smart one. Well, this is a fascinating area. How's it going? I mean, do you feel good about where the business is going, or it almost seems to me like you're out on the cutting edge of the technology. You're waiting for people to catch up to you. Is that part of the issue?
Yes, definitely. So I think when we started the company and the very first ideation was roughly 5 years ago or so. And a very early investors as well. It was a very, very visionary idea. And that's what also got our investors coming formerly from Sequoia Capital and Intel Capital, Samsung and others to really like the
Hmm.
idea because it's one of those, kind of aim for the star, shoot for the stars, worst case, you land on the moon kind of ideas, right? So
Right.
we did that. And for a long time, you said at the beginning that maybe sometimes hard to explain what it is that Excite do. For a long time, I think we were okay with the fact that people didn't really understand what it is that we do. But now, and especially the first industry that we started in, we're seeing great growth. We actually hit an inflection point at the end of 2025, and we more than 6x grew our ecosystem and more than 3x grew our revenue in the last 12 months. So we see that more and more customers on board the platform, both enterprise customers and device manufacturers, that the ecosystem is growing. But it was definitely not an easy start. There is a lot of market education to begin with. We created a completely new product category. We were looking at the budget lines that organization in many cases simply did
Right.
not have, right? So there's definitely
Right.
challenges, and how do you explain, how do you pitch, how do you articulate that to the potential customers? But I think that's one of the things that make startups so unique and so exciting, and at least for me, so fun to wake up every morning, early in the morning, and work hard to achieve another milestone and achieve more um, additional milestones.
Yeah, I think that's tremendous. That's a great way to live our lives, isn't it? We have something excited about every morning when we get up, and I think that's tremendous that you do. What do you see as maybe the hurdles on the horizon for AI implementation, how it's going to affect our business and our lives. What's happening in your space, so to speak, that you're concerned about?
Well, I actually think AI opens a whole new. Well, maybe that's just me, right? But
Mhm.
when I see a new challenge or a new risk, some people will argue, I mostly see a new opportunity. And I think specifically with AI and specifically for Excite, it opens a whole new set of really exciting opportunities. Because as you look at Excite from, I guess a higher, more strategic perspective in AI, right? So AI really in the last 2 or 3 years has been the most amazing tech revolution ever. And will it really help and greatly help teams to be more efficient and each and every one of us is with digital assets, right? Looking at documents, connecting to tickets and CRM records, and obviously ask questions about the internet to ChatGPT and so on. But when you think about it, AI does not have access to the entire physical world around us, right? You have a computer, you have a microphone in your room, maybe a speaker, a guitar behind you. This is beyond the reach of every AI. And the physical devices around us, they need a bridge to the latest AI and large language models out there. And in many, many ways, Excite creates that bridge. And by doing so, our enterprise customers today can be more efficient when they manage tens of thousands of assets and devices across their premises. Some of them are
Mhm.
Fortune 500 and 100 companies because they now can leverage AI to do agentic workflows, to use agentic remediation to fix issues 24/7, 365 days a year, no lunch break or time to take some rest around, right? AI can simply do all of that and really only involve a person when it needs a human in the loop. It also allows the device manufacturers to start and introduce AI-based premium features and charge for them based on usage and how the customer consumes. So I really do think it's a great, great opportunity. We're really just starting with that, but our customers are super excited about everything that we do with AI.
Well, that's really very insightful. I'm looking forward to the day that you are going to create with Excite an interface that my guitar will play itself for me. So let's see. Let's
Probably
see.
by next week in the pace things
Okay, good. Next
the same.
weekend would be great. I got a little gig that we're doing. So, Omer, that's great as background. In this program, we analyze the real world stories of key executives like yourselves, and we look for the leadership lessons inside. So, let's transition to that. Tell us a story about a big win or maybe a tough hurdle you had to get over, and let's talk about it. Let's see where it goes.
Well, first of all, I think, being a founder and entrepreneur, every day is like that, right? You have smaller and bigger wins and you have others and challenging pretty much every day. But I think that maybe one of the more interesting one is I spent most of my career in the professional audio video industry. As you mentioned before, I worked for a large company called Preston Electronics out of New Jersey.
Mhm.
And in this industry, like others and unlike other industries, there was many device manufacturers lean towards siloed, kind of closed garden solutions in many ways. And the rationale behind that is that, if I sell you one of my products, I'd like you to keep buying more products from me. And roughly a year ago, I came back from a trade show. And once again, after being for more than 20 years in this industry, it became very, very frustrating for me because I felt that we're not doing, as an industry, everything that we need to address our customer requirements. Our customers ask us for more open, integrated, easily integrated solutions. So when we came back with that, we started thinking about it internally and we reached out to some other great companies in the industry, including Sony, Panasonic, Shure, Legrand, Brightside, which is maybe less known for the wider audience, but it's one of the top leaders in digital signage. And we
Mhm.
founded a new industry alliance that's called Open AV Cloud. And what that alliance do, or the goal for this alliance, is to make the industry more open and make it easier for our customers to integrate different solutions and also make it easier for customers to decouple from a single vendor. And you could argue that it is not in the best favor of each one of those favors. But I strongly believe that if we as vendors come to our customers in the industry and say, hey, we would like you to choose us, Excite, or any other vendor every day from scratch, and we will work as hard as we can to win your trust every day, that's a much better solution. That's a much better value for our customers that will simply make the pie much larger and it'll help us grow the industry, make our customers happier about that. And sure, we'll win some business, we'll lose some business. That's just life, right? But as an industry, we will grow. And that wasn't easy and still not, but we're recruiting more and more vendor into this alliance as they understand and agree and align with everything we believe in, including companies like Adobe and most recently Logitech and Intel and many other large brands, joining that new alliance.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting story. So I expect, as you indicated, there were some differences of opinion inside your company and inside your client companies as well about whether or not it was good to standardize. Because in many cases, especially with technology over the years, I think we've all experienced, having, like 20 or 30 power cords for devices, for example. And
Mhm.
now, this is a simple example. Things starting to standardize and come together is really a big customer satisfier. So, what was the department or the let's say the responsibility of the people who were fighting the hardest? You were in the technology side of the business, so you're saying you really should have just been delivering to what someone's telling you from the marketing department. The marketing and customer experience people should have been telling you, we need to standardize this stuff. We need to work with our clients to make this happen. And yet you're taking the lead on this. Now, what were the marketing and branding people say, the customer service people, the public relations people, the finance people? Tell me about each of the groups of leadership you had to interact with to discuss this issue.
It's interesting. I don't know if we can segment them by type of user, but I would say
Yeah.
that where we got the biggest objection is actually from the more technical people, right? And I think that technical people, often they have a very specific perspective. They'd like to protect their technology and their investment. And in many cases, they tend to miss the forest for the trees and miss the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, and you gave the example of a USB-C, which is a great example. I often use the example of just simply Ethernet, right? And the best
Mm-hmm.
example is that whatever HP and Cisco and Dell, they can compete on switches, right? But the fact
Mm-hmm.
the byte from one switch to another router can flow from different brands just made the Ethernet the standard pretty much for every network out there, right? From phones and home network and so on.
Sure.
And that
Sure.
made the pie, that industry and the potential total addressable market so much bigger. So there's enough room for so many companies to innovate in that. And then there's so much you can innovate on top, right? And that's something that, often more visionary business people that, are more kind of careful to listen to their customers and what they're asking.
Right.
They understand that. They see the value and they see the long-term value. Sometimes it is harder for technical people, mostly focused on what's coming, in the next iteration of the product to see. But I think it's also it's a question of personality. If you feel confident about what you develop, if you feel confident about the value that you bring to your customers, then people immediately join in. If you less confident about what makes your product and solution unique, then you're trying some other strategy that once again I think should be completely removed nowadays to kind of force your customer to keep buying your products. And customer
So,
gets it, so they kind of push them away, right?
right, right. So, an interesting kind of insight that the technical people were the ones that perhaps were the most resistant. Was there a little bit of I know how to do it best, so this is the best solution for our particular product or our particular execution, and they didn't want to accept a substandard execution if that happened to be the standardized kind of flow?
In some cases, once again, just to be clear, there are some really great technical people and CTOs leading our effort,
Yeah.
right? So there's a mix of everything. But yes, in some cases we see that, what we call NIH, not invented here, right? And I know how to do it. I know how to do it best, and I'll build it in-house. So I'll make my solution unique. And people tend to, you know, miss the point or forget that there's so many things that are simply not unique to your solution. And there's a great pitch, by the way, by Jeff Bezos when they first launched AWS. And I'm probably gonna ruin that story, but he talked about the beer factories in Europe in, I think, the 1700s, right? Where the leading beer factories at the time, they each had their power generator, and they hired electrical engineers to run those power generators so they can produce more beer, and so on and so forth. And what happens later on is that they started put power grid in Europe, right? And all the new factories just plugged into the grid. But all the old factories just kind of sticked into that and say, we already invested in that. We know how to do it best, and just kept hiring more and more, electrical engineers. And the bottom line of the story is that they obviously lost, right? Because they didn't focus on what makes their beer taste better. I think that is an amazing analogy, because people with that kind of mentality of, we're unique, we'll build something in-house that will be just best fit for our needs, miss the fact they need to put those resources and focus on developing their solution for their customers, and everything else you can buy off the shelf. And that's a decision we made in Excite, and I made as an CIO, as the CEO. Everything we can buy off the shelf and move faster and better, faster iterate and
Right.
deliver a better solution to our customers, we prefer to do so.
It's always best to focus on your core competency and where you can add the most value.
Exactly.
So I think it's a great decision. It was easy for you because you're running the business, but if you think about the previous example you were sharing in the story there, was it the CEO who had to make the decision? Was the call, did it go all the way up to the top of the company, or was there enough collaboration that it just kind of took its own course that way?
Within the context of OpenAV Cloud, or within the context of
Yes,
Sky?
yeah, within the context of the standardization in the
Yeah.
devices, you're working across your clients and across your own internal activities.
Yeah, so it depends obviously on the company size as well. In many cases, it even SMB, so it gets to the CEO or senior executive. In many other cases, like with Panasonic and Sony, Adobe, Logitech, and others, obviously it doesn't get all the way to the CEO, but that those companies in many ways have this kind of DNA or mentality that they understand the value, and luckily they have executive people that understand that. But I think it's all about the DNA of the company as well. If a company has that, one of the jobs of a CEO is to, put that, once again, DNA or this kind of whatever, values to his employees and the team. And if the CEO delivered that message, it kind of populates down. People understand it, and that's how they operate in the day to day. So when a decision like that comes up, it's immediate for them, and they know what the executive and what the organization, is looking to achieve, and so on, and they're happy to join.
Yeah, clearly it's important that the CEO communicate very clearly and make the call. So great. I think that's a really good study in how interactions between various people with different points of view in a company need to be harnessed to create the synergy that's necessary to create value. So I love that. Looking back on it now, do you think you would do anything differently if you're in that same situation you were in before? Would you do anything differently in that situation?
Oh, the OpenAV.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure. Look, when looking backward, it's always easy to see where you were right, right?
Right. Mhm.
And there's another great quote I like that, looking backward, it's easy to see everything. Looking forward, you kind of have to believe, right? So I think
Yeah.
we
Right.
did that with a lot of belief, and we believe in what we do. And I think we were joined, but by really great visionary people from all those companies. And obviously, I'll do things slightly different. I think we could position it better to the market. I'm always think we can move faster, and that's one of the benefits of being a software agile software company and not
Mhm.
working for a very large corporate. And I think we could move faster. But generally, I think we did an amazing job. And you talked about before getting all those people aligned. Getting all those people aligned from dozens of companies is a factor of magnitude more challenging, right? I think we did some very, very meaningful things, and we're really just getting started with that. So I'm very, very happy with the progress, and we always try to learn and improve.
Good. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, let's move on to wrap up this conversation today, and I like to ask a couple of questions if you'll allow me. Let's
Sure.
rewind 20 years back to when you were a much younger man and just getting started. Knowing what you know now, one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Well, first, I gotta say that I think this is a great question, and you shared that question with me before the podcast, so I prepared. And what's great about that, it actually made me think, right, for a second. And look, I think that if I look 20 years back, right, I was in my 20s, I was still in my military service. But I think the biggest thing is that the understanding is that everything is possible. There's a very large world out there, right? And especially for me, coming from a relatively small country in Israel, right? And the United States, obviously, and Europe are much, much larger markets. And if you willing to dedicate your time, work hard, believe in something, and if you have the resilience and the conviction in something, there's really so many things that a person can do, right? There's so many things that you can change. And I see myself in the context of Excite and the wider context of the industry you operate in as a change agent. And OpenAV is just one example, right? Everything we do with an AI is another example. We talk about Excite and how unique we are. That's another example, right? So I'm always looking to do things that can have significant impact, that can change things, that can improve, that can have impact for our customers and their customers. So I think 20 years ago, just believe that everything is possible. And if you're willing to dedicate the time and effort, you can achieve it.
Well, the power of belief is something that I talk about quite a bit, and it's amazing what we can accomplish when we will dare to believe. So I really love that. All right, let's fast forward now in the other direction. You and I are sitting having a coffee, maybe looking out over the Dead Sea, and we're contemplating our careers and our lives. What are we talking about, and what will you tell me you're most proud of?
I guess those changes, right? The fact that you can take something and not just accept the status quo and not just accept that things are like that because they were like that for the last 20 or some years. And understanding that, when I started the company, I just knew that we could do a better job at developing software to support hardware very simply. And I also understood that there's no way to do it within the hardware company because of all the characteristics of those hardware companies moving slower and being more conservative and so on. So, I just stepped out. I left my job. I lived over of my savings for over a year, right?
Mhm.
And so looking at that and looking at everything that we achieved, the team that we built, the money that we've raised, the customer that we changed so much for them, right? That's what I'm most proud of. Obviously, my family, my kids as well. You see them grow and change and grow as adults as well. But all those changes, I don't want to look back in 20 years and say, you know what, I was there in my comfort zone. I didn't do anything special or unique or exciting. I almost want to change every day, every week, every month, and keep growing. I think I'm very, very fortunate as a founder, as an entrepreneur, that every day is different. Every day it's like climbing, cycling uphill. Every day is a challenge. Every day you improve. Every day you learn some new things, and you're just becoming bigger as a person. And that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, I think that's great. What you talked about there is you've created tremendous value for other people, and you've made sure that solutions get through in the best possible way they can reach people. You're not afraid to take on the challenges of the day to make that happen. And if you do that day after day after day, you're going to produce a number of big wins, maybe a few losses along the way, but a lot of wins. And boy, that's going to have a positive impact on the world, on other people, including your family. So, yeah, I think we all honor that response, Omer, and would love to. I think they will all move in that direction. So, yeah, well done. So, yeah, that's it for today. If people wanted to get in touch with you, ask questions, or get in touch with Excite, how would they do that?
Well, with Excite, generally, it's easiest to go to our website, xyte.ai, and I'm always happy to follow up on email. So it's Omer, Omer, at excite.ai, and also always happy to connect on LinkedIn, obviously. So I'm very, very easy to reach.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Thanks for being with us today. Very insightful, very mind expanding. And we look forward to staying in touch and watching what you're doing.
Likewise, thank you so much, Wen, for having me today.
All the best and God bless.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for Driven to Lead today. We really appreciate you being with us. Share this with a friend or a business colleague if you would. And if I could remind you again, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're very grateful for that. So until next time, always remember, the high road leads to a better place.